Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be around the world, and welcome to another Agency Success live stream with hosting.com. My name is Nathan Ingram. I'm the agency coach here at Agency Success. So glad we have this opportunity today to work on building our starter site. Now, as I was mentioning in the pre-show, this is part one of two, where we will be unpacking the essentials for getting a starter site up and running for your WordPress development work. The next one will be coming 2 weeks from today. And if you have not already registered for that, I'm dropping in our link bundle once again there in the chat. That first link where you can register for upcoming live streams is where you can see everything. And it's right there at upcoming.myagencysuccess.com. I'm also going to drop in the link to download this handbook or guide that you see on your screen today. If you're just now joining us, make sure you grab that. It's a Google Drive link. It'll open this PDF and you can have this to follow along with. All righty. So let's get started talking about where we're headed over the next hour or so. I'm afraid I might be just a little ambitious in the amount of material we're going to try to cover today. We're going to do our best. Quick little disclaimer here. All of this that we talk about is for educational purposes. I'm going to give some recommendations for plugins and strategies and various ways to build a WordPress site. These are mine and mine alone, and I just offer those to you as a fellow developer with hopes that they might help you in your process. So let's just talk briefly about what is a starter site. So when I talk about a starter site, I'm talking about a single WordPress site that you can replicate and use for developing all of your future websites for your clients, for yourself, whatever. So the reason that this is important is that we tend to do the same thing over and over again if you're starting from scratch with every website. Like if you're installing WordPress or, whatever, you've got to install your theme and plugins and make a bunch of settings and do a bunch of things, which really, if you do that once in one starter site, and then just replicate that for all of your future projects, it's going to save you a ton of time. So our main goal here is to eliminate a bunch of repeated work. There's a few benefits in using a starter site. The first I've already alluded to is efficiency. If you use a starter site, you are going to be more efficient in the way you build websites because you're eliminating these repeated tasks that have to be done for every website that we build. It's also going to build proficiency. So if you build all of your websites out of the same starter site with the same theme and plugin stack, you're going to get better and better at doing what you do. You become more proficient. You get better at it as you go. And these two things, the efficiency and proficiency, lead to confidence, which is, look, as you learn to streamline your processes, your workflow, you get better and better at the tools you use. That's going to change the way you think about yourself, about the work you're producing, and your pricing for that matter. So all of this, yes, it's a starter site. It's a technical thing, but it can really begin to change the way you think about how you do your work. So there's a hidden benefit here, and I hope you find it as you are really bringing a starter site into your workflow. So as I mentioned before, this is a two-part live stream. Today is the foundation. So we're going to start with a clean install of WordPress. We're going to customize a WP config file. We're going to discuss themes and page builders and that whole world and where things are. And then we're going to work on some theme settings. Now, in the live stream 2 weeks from now, we're going to work on a custom functions plugin. I'm going to give you a bunch of snippets that are probably going to be helpful in your starter site, and also a recommendation for some plugins to consider as a starter plugin stack for all of your websites that you build. So that's where we're heading over the next couple of live streams today and 2 weeks from today. There's a great question in the chat from Barry. Thank you for asking that, Barry. Yes, we record everything that we do here on Agency Success. There is a YouTube channel. I'm going to drop in our link bundle in once again. There we go. Link bundle is there waiting on you in the chat, and you'll see the second link in that bundle is replays. That's replays.myagencysuccess.com. And that's basically a short link to a YouTube channel where all of the playlist where all of our agency success live streams live. So it may take a little longer for this one to get up onto YouTube because of the holidays, but it will be there. It just might take several days. All right. So let's get started with a fresh install of WordPress. One more quick matter of housekeeping. If you have questions, I am going to keep the chat open. So if you have questions about something that we are looking at right at this moment, then drop that in the chat and I'll try to answer those questions in context. If you have just a broader question that doesn't specifically pertain to what we're doing at that moment, put it in the Zoom Q&A, please, and we'll get to those at the end of the live stream today. So if you can help me with that, that will help our flow go very, very well. And one more time, here is the link for today's handbook there waiting on you in the chat. Okay, so it's important to start fresh. Now, this is really, it's very, very helpful, especially if you've been using a starter site for a while, and it might be your habit to replicate your starter site and tweak it with some new ideas and things for the next coming year. And that's okay. However, if you've been making copies of that starter site for several years, it could very well be that you have some database bloat and some other things that are happening. And every now and then, it's good to just start with a fresh install of WordPress. For a lot of years, I just tweaked my existing starter site, and we ended up with a lot of extra stuff in the database. So we had to learn that lesson the hard way. The importance of starting fresh, manual install is the way to go. So just start by installing WordPress fresh. Now, there are installers out there like Fantastico and Softaculous that you can use to install WordPress. Those tend to add their own connectors and some other extra stuff that you might not want in that good, clean install of WordPress you're going to use to replicate. So my recommendation is not to use those. You can use, though, cPanel's WP Toolkit installer. It's pretty clean. There's a couple of things we'll need to tweak, but that's actually what we're going to use this time to install WordPress. Now, I have included, just from years past, the instructions for installing WordPress manually. So if you want to do it that way, or if your hosting provider doesn't offer WP Toolkit, which is a part of cPanel, then just use the manual install, and that's great. Or if you're running your starter site locally in a local development environment, just use the manual install here, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, we are going to use the WordPress toolkit, the WP Toolkit installer, though, as it's pretty clean and it is pretty fast. So that's where we're heading today, and I'm going to move some things around so we can see everything that we're working on. And so I've given you step-by-step here. So what we're going to do is go down and start off by opening WP Toolkit in our control panel, and we're going to click the big blue Install WordPress button. Now, I want to see quickly what version it's going to give us. Now, I was hoping 6.9 would have dropped by the time our live stream started today, but it has not. It will drop at some point today, but we're still going to be working with WordPress 6.8.3, which is the latest version at this moment. So we're going to update our title and then our administrator login. So our website title here is going to be Starter Site 2026, because we're coming up to the new year. We're not going to, WP Toolkit allows you to install some pre-configured plugin stack. We're not going to do that. And right here, we leave all of this the same. And let's go ahead and change our login name. I'm going to quickly generate a password over here just to keep a little bit of security in place. We'll add our password here and my email. Okay, now a couple little changes down below here. We are going to get into our database section. And I do like, as I'm creating new sites, I like to give the database name a name that I'll be able to look at cPanel later and realize what that database pertains to, especially if there's multiple databases in a particular cPanel. So we're just going to call this the database name. So I'll be able to see this is the database that goes with my 2026 starter site. The database user, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to change some of these final characters to something random. And then we'll need a user password as well. So let's get that generated. We can just leave that as it is. Now, one more thing we do need to look at here. For the table prefix, this is a personal choice. I do like to still have a WP underscore there, just in case there are any other tables on this site for whatever reason that aren't WordPress. The WP can still help those. That's just a personal opinion. And there are a couple of things here under automatic update settings we need to do as well. Simply change this first automatic update to yes, but only minor security updates. So once these changes are made, as I've listed them here, we're just going to install WordPress. So this is going to take care of everything for us. Oh dear, the database prefix is longer than 10 characters. Well, let's just delete a few. Trying it now. All right. So this is doing the job for us now of downloading WordPress, unpacking it, configuring it, doing all the things. So this particular, the WP Toolkit is a cPanel. It's an app that's included in cPanel. So if your hosting provider doesn't include cPanel, you'll need to do the manual install. All right. So we now have our WordPress set up here. I'm going to jump right over here to the file manager. And now, yep, here's all of our WordPress things. Now, there's one more little thing we need to do. So we have WordPress running, and I have it running here at wp1.dev. And so it's just a plain empty WordPress site. And so one thing we want to do here, and this is a little bit of an old school practice. It's not incredibly important, but it just takes a minute. And I think it's helpful, especially as we're going to replicate this site going forward. So something you'll notice, anytime WordPress sets up, runs an install, and you create a user as part of a wizard like this, it's going to give that user ID number 1. And so user ID 1 is something that spammers or hackers will try to use with a bot to try to log into the site. And it's not the most secure practice ever. It's not going to make a gigantic change to your WordPress security level, but this is a quick change. You can do it once and it's done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. We're just going to change this user ID 1 to something else, like 2, for example. So we can do this in phpMyAdmin. There are other ways to do it. This is super quick. I'm just going to copy this SQL command, click on my database name, and run that right here. Now, the only change I have to make is we need to make sure the table prefix matches. So my table prefix here, is has this WP underscore C, etc. So what I'm going to do is just copy this bit right here, and just make sure that that is the same all the way across for all of these database items. And then I can just hit go, and that's going to change all of my user IDs and all the places. So now I am user ID 2, and it is all good. So you can just follow these instructions right here. This is not even a mandatory thing to do. It's just a good practice to not have a user ID that is number 1. So just follow this process and you can change that here. There are plugins that can do it as well. But now we have our user ID set to 2, and we're good. Now, there's a couple of other things here in the WP config file. A quick question in the chat. Billy's asking, can't you just edit the field? You could, but there are items in some of these other tables, like you need to edit it in the user meta. And, you got the sample page and the hello world post that are going to be tied to user ID 1. It's better just to run this and it changes that user ID everywhere. And again, if getting into the database is a little above your technical ability, you don't have to do this. It's not, your site's not going to get hacked if this happens. It's a simple thing that if you understand how to do it, it's just good to do for a site you're going to replicate. Does that make sense? But it's certainly not the end of the world if you don't feel comfortable doing that. All right. There's a couple of things in the WP config. There are two things that WP Toolkit adds to the WP config file that really I'm not a fan of, that we'll want to take a look at. So I brought my code editor in here so that we can blow it up and make it a little bigger so everyone can see. And I'm just going to open up that WP. This is the standard WP config file that it just created. So there are two things here that I recommend removing. Now we're about to do a deep dive into the WP config and change all of this. And so you can do it at that time, but I want to make sure I point out these two things. If you're installing with WP Toolkit, you'll probably want to remove these. The first is this statement. Why WP Toolkit puts this in here, I don't know, but they do allow multi-site equals true. So unless you're going to use WP multi-site, which I would not recommend, just delete this. Just delete it. The other thing I would recommend is several lines down, you'll see this, which they've put in as sort of a safeguard, but it's not needed at all. It's not recommended. Again, I don't know why they put it in there. I'm just going to delete that as well. So those are the two extra things above a clean WordPress install that WP Toolkit adds. We can just get rid of those things and we're good to go. All right. Pausing just for a moment. Does this make sense to everybody? Any lingering questions out here that I missed? Somebody said there's a typo in my email address. It doesn't really matter at this point. All right. Okay. So let's get into the WP config file itself. Now, this is, again, personal preference. Is the WP config file going to work like this? Absolutely. However, wouldn't it be nice to have a clean WP config file without all these comments and it's kind of everywhere. And there's some things we want to add to the WP config, and we're going to clean it up and make it look really, really nice. And so I started doing this on my starter sites a long time ago, and I just really like the way this looks. So I've given you a link here in the handout for this gist. It should be public to everyone. And this is we used to put the code directly into the document, but you'd get weird line breaks and curly quote marks instead of straight ones. And so this is just the easiest way to get this code. Everyone should be able to access this link. It's a public link. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this whole code block, and I'm going to paste it at the top of this file. And we're just going to fill it in from the information below. And I'm just going to walk you through what I've put here and what it means and why you would want to have it here in your WP config. All right. So at the top here, I like to put the WP debug at the very top of the WP config file, because if I need to turn on WP debug, it's just right there at the top. I don't have to go looking for it. It's just right there. Now, you do not have to define these as false, but this just makes it a lot easier to change them to true. False is the default value for these constants, meaning they don't have to be there as false, but I put them in there so the syntax is correct and it's easy to change them to true. Does that make sense? And put them right there at the top so that they're easy to find. Now, the next little block that I've done here is, and by the way, all of these things are fully explained over here in the handout. And what I've done next here is I have pulled all of the database related items together here in one block. So what I'm going to do is go down to the original bit of the WP config file down here and grab all of this information. All right. So I'm going to grab this part. Yeah, this part here first, and just go right up underneath here and paste this, and we'll move this over. So DB name is here. My user is here. The password I set is here. Here's our host. It needs a port name. All right, so I've just put this in, so I'm going to remove this. All right. Now let's go back down here because I need to get that table prefix, which is going to be way down here for some reason. And we'll put that into our little template. Okay, now there's a couple of things here that are different. Now you'll notice right here, the character set is set for UTF-8 MB4. This was a question in office hours last week. And you'll see down here, the original value is just UTF-8. What's the difference? Well, I've explained it to you here in the handout. UTF-8 MB4 is a broader character set. By default, especially on an older WordPress site, you see UTF-8. They're similar, but UTF-8 MB4 just has more characters defined for special characters like emojis and other little symbols and so forth. It just makes sense to use that character set because over time, UTF-8 is going to be phased out. So this is a change to make from the typical standard WP config file. Does that make sense, everybody? We've got our collate and we have our prefix set. All right. Now, I've added space between these blocks. This is simply for white space to make things easier to read. Doesn't matter programmatically. Okay, so now we need to move down to the next little set here. This is not in a standard WP config, but I really like to do this. How many of you, when working with clients, have ever had a client try to change the name of the site in the settings and general area, right? So there's that area in settings and general where it's got the name of the domain name of the website. By putting it here, so this is going to be wp1.dev. And here as well, this hard codes those the web addresses so they cannot be changed from within the WordPress UI. So that's a really important change to make right there. And I've explained that right here again in the guide. WordPress has a site URL and a home URL. Those can be different in certain cases. Generally, they're the same. And I've given you some more information if you want to understand when and why you might ever want those to be different. Now, this is a magic line in your WP config. This core upgrade skip new bundled. This is a beautiful line for the WP config because how many times have you updated WordPress and oh my gosh, there's a new default theme installed and the Kismet is back and Hello Dolly is back and all of that. What this constant in the WP config does is say, when I update WordPress, I don't want any of the other bundled stuff. I don't want you to install any default themes, the new default theme. I don't want to have any Hello Dolly or a Kismet, any of those plugins in there. This turns that off, and it is super, super helpful. So this, I always put this in my WP config. Now, the next one here is concatenate scripts false. And what this is going to do, this is a holdover from WordPress from many years ago, even before HTTP 2 was a thing. A lot of stuff has to load when you load the WP admin. And so WordPress by default tries to concatenate or basically cram all those scripts and JavaScripts together into one file that you download. The problem is that can cause lots of unexpected behavior in the back end. And we've actually experienced that in our client work where things just break. Plugins do weird things and whatever. So It's not needed anymore since HTTP2 was invented many years ago that allows these files to be downloaded at the same time. This concatenation is not necessary. So just turn that off. It's going to make your admin more reliable. Now, the next thing I'm putting here is the WP cache false. Now, I'm putting this here similarly to the way I've put these up here. Because when you add a caching plugin, it's going to add this constant to your WP config and turn it true. But I want all this stuff together. I don't want plugins just adding stuff wherever they want to add stuff. And so I keep it right here under my core options. I set it for false, which is the default value. And then when and if I install a caching plugin, it'll just find that line and turn it to true. So this way we kind of keep everything in a nice, tidy little bundle. Now, the next bit here are our the keys and salts. So this is the standard WordPress install. Put your unique phrase here. Down below, we have a couple of options. We can just copy. That's probably what I'll do is just copy this block and move that up here. We're going to end up deleting all that down below anyway. So there's all our salts. If you want to generate these fresh, I've given you the link in the handout. This is right from WordPress.org. Every time you hit this page, it randomly gives you a new salt block. Now, very important. When you are, don't miss this, okay? When you are building a site from your starter site, unless you rotate these salts as part of your launch process, then all of your sites are going to have the same salts. And that's not good, because if one set gets compromised, it's possible then for an attacker to get access to all of your sites. You want these to be randomized for every site. Now, there's certain plugins, certain security plugins will refresh these for you from within WordPress. We do it as part of the launch process. When we launch a site, we just go and generate our new salts and we're done. That way, all of our sites have a unique set of keys and salts. Does that make sense, everybody? But these I just copied from down below because they would have been unique when WP Toolkit generated the site. Jamie is asking, is there a script to refresh the keys and salts? It's not hard to do. I'm sure there's a plugin, just a discrete plugin that will do it. A lot of WordPress security plugins have that feature built in, or you can just go to this again, just go to that link and you can copy and paste it. Okay, the next little bit here is a security block. Now, if you are using a security plugin, the example here is from Solid Security, the former iTheme Security. It has several lines that it likes to put in, and I just put them all together here. Whatever security plugin you're using, find their little block of WP config items. You can put them all together just to kind of keep things in order. All right, the next block that is interesting is our post and media options. Now, I've got 4 here that I think you might want to take a look at. The first one is the number of post revisions. Now, by default, WordPress keeps unlimited revisions of your post and pages in the database. That's a lot, and over time, it can really clutter up your database. And so you can set those to 10 or 20 or whatever you want right here in the WP config with that constant. The next little default value we're going to change here is our autosave interval. So this is the time in seconds where WordPress will automatically save your page or post that you're working on. The default is 60 seconds. We're going to up that to 120. That's my choice. The next thing we have here, and you may not even have been aware this is a thing, but you can actually have trash in your media library, like you have trash in your pages and posts. So if you define media trash true, instead of the standard way when you go into the media library, if you want to delete something, it's delete it permanently. This will actually put a trash stage in. So it trashes a media file, and then 30 days later, it will fully delete it. So if you want that, I think it's a pretty cool feature. That way, things aren't accidentally deleted out of the media library. And the final item here is image edit overwrite true. Now, again, you may not have known this, but if you go into the WordPress image editor and you make some changes to an image, it actually creates a whole other image. And if that's what you want, that's great. However, if you want your editing of that image to overwrite the original image, use this image edit overwrite true. I like that behavior. That's what we use. Quick question in the chat. Nathan is asking, is the post revisions a cap or designate the most recent 10 revisions? Yes and yes. So it's limiting the number of revisions to the last 10. So when you edit it, the one that was the latest one gets deleted. So it's always going to keep the 10 latest revisions for a page or post. Nathan is saying, so once it hits 10, you can't save it. No. It's the latest 10. Yeah. All right. Next little item here having to do with PHP, PHP memory limit. This is every WordPress developer has their own opinion about this. We'll set our default memory limit at 128. By default, WordPress only asks for 40 megs of memory. There aren't many sites that only need that much. If you have a very basic WordPress site, this is probably fine. However, any amount of plugins, you're going to start consuming your memory, and you'll get these errors like allowed memory size of some number of bytes is exhausted. And so you need more. So 128 or 256 is probably good for most sites. Pardon me, just one second. So yeah, 128 or 256 should work well. If you're running WooCommerce, generally it's going to take 512 minimum in practice, especially if you have a bunch of WooCommerce add-ons. So start with 128, and it's here by itself, easy to find if you need to bump that up later. All right, so that's the end of our really nice WP config file. So what I'm going to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom and just delete all this extra stuff that was there. And we now have a really nicely laid out, easy to read, easy to manage WP config file. And there's a few other options here that I'll, just for the sake of time, I'll let you go through and decide if you want to do any of these. They're just interesting little constants that you can add to the WP config. All right. A couple of other little cleanup items that are needed. There are 3 files here that are added to core WordPress that we really don't need, and we can delete those. I mean, they're teeny tiny, they don't matter, but they shouldn't be there. We don't need those going forward, is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to go to license.txt, readme.html, and the WP config sample, and we're just going to delete those. Now, again, I'm using my code editor here. You could do this in File Manager if you wanted, or however you want to edit the file structure. So we've cleaned up those files. We've got a great install of WordPress here that is ready to go. Now, let me just quickly show you. I just realized I'm not sure I can log into the site. Let's see if we can get there. 1 second. Oh no. Oh no. All right. So I inadvertently did not remember the password for logging in. So this gives us an opportunity to demonstrate how to reset the password from the phpMyAdmin. You can also do this with a function if you want, but I'm just going to go into my user here that I created. I'm going to go down to my password right here, and I'm going to drop this password in. The trick here, this is the password I want. The trick here is I've got to select MD5 hashing from this function list. And when I save it, that should have reset my password for me. But let's try this again. Uh-oh. Not good. We may have to do something else here. All right. Well, let's do something else then. There is a way to get in to our WordPress site with a function, and that's what we're going to do. So give me the WordPress. We're just going to let Claude generate this. Well, so we could go through the lost password function, but I don't have any email deliverability set up on this. And so it is very likely. Oh, Greg, that's a great. We should just do that. So there's a couple of options. You can use a function like this. This would totally do it. Let's do our WP Toolkit, WP CLI. If you've never played with WP CLI, it can be daunting, but WP Toolkit gives us a nice way to interact with WP CLI right here. So this opens up a terminal, and I'm going to do this. All right, my new password here. I'm going to change this to my new password, hit this button, and it's done. Isn't that cool? So that should let us log in. Isn't that interesting? We are completely locked out of our WordPress site. Isn't this delightful? Were there errors in CLI? Oh, invalid user. All right, let's just go back to this. We could try a password reset, but we're just going to generate a function that creates our admin user. This I know will work. So this is what we call affirmation time. If you've ever broken WordPress before, um, yeah, you're not alone. And technically, WordPress isn't broken. I'm just broken. It may be some issue with how we changed the database. Okay, so this code is going to be our savior. All right, so we're going to drop this into the functions.php of our active theme. Oh my. And this should solve our problem. All right, new admin is going to be Nathan1. My password. All right, let's try this again. Oh, there's a critical error. Oh, because of this. There we go. Okay, let's try this now. Magic. Okay. Okay. Now, that was easy. All right. So that will likely never happen to you. But there you go. There are multiple ways of getting yourself back into WordPress, and probably we could have done the password reset. But what fun would that be, right? Um, yeah. So we are now currently in WordPress. One thing I'll call your attention to is this beautiful thing right here where people can't change the site address because we hard coded it. Yes, Paul, thank you. I need to save that password. Actually, let's log out and log back in so that it remembers this password. Uh, well, it's not prompting me to remember it. I have it saved off the screen here. Okay. All right. Now that we have a wonderful working version of WordPress, which we can log into, let's keep going and talk about the theme, shall we? Oh, look, do we have? No, it's still on 6.8.3. I thought we might have had the new version of WordPress, but we do not. Well, let's talk about themes. And everybody has their own idea about what a theme should be. And the point of this conversation today is not to choose one theme over another or have my opinion, whatever. I've got my opinion. I'm sure you have your opinion. But a brief history of the WordPress theme, I think, is helpful. When we first got into building sites, I did many, many years ago. Back in those days, it was, oh, we have a client who's a lawyer, so let's go buy a lawyer theme. Remember those days? Any of you WordPress geezers around from that period of WordPress? Like you could say, oh, it's a realtor. Let's go get a realtor theme, or it's a mechanic. Let's go find a mechanic theme. Anyway, there were all these niche themes, and that was a time in WordPress where there were a lot of these were cookie cutter websites, not a lot of creativity. Well, then what happened was these theme marketplaces began to spring up, like Theme Forest and all these other places, right? And what you begin to get is kitchen sink themes because what theme developers realized, and they're just trying to make money, what they began to realize is the more features we cram into our theme, the better it looks when it's compared to our competitors, right? And so you had this age of WordPress themes where there were all these functions like, oh, this theme includes a portfolio. This theme includes a bunch of sliders. This theme includes all the stuff. And, while that looks good from a features perspective, it's not the WordPress way to do a theme. A theme is supposed to just handle the way the site looks, not what the site does. And so they were putting plug-in functionality into a theme, which just made it hard to deal with. And you have bloated themes, like there's a bunch of them still around today, that come from this era. Then we moved into the age of the page builder, right? People remember that. And the original page builder, WP Bakery, started to be packaged with some of these kitchen sink themes to make the sink even bigger. And then other page builders came around. And so there began to a whole new generation of themes came out that were sort of a canvas for the page builders. And so in this era of WordPress, which is still around today, WordPress was sort of the easel, and the theme sort of provided the frame, the framework, the canvas, and then the painting was actually done by your page builder to design all the intricate elements of the theme and the website itself, right? And so there's a lot of themes today that are still built around that era. And then the new era here in the last couple of years is the era of block themes. This is the next generation of themes. These are, and by the way, I'm not talking about themes that can use WordPress blocks. Every theme can probably use WordPress blocks. Block themes is a technical term that says this is a theme that no longer uses the customizer. In fact, it now uses the site editor, which is where most of the development in Gutenberg has been in the last couple of years. So they are using the site editor instead of the customizer to build out everything. And so your headers and footers and a lot of the things that page builders were controlling is now in the site editor itself. So that's kind of where we are. Now, depending on what you do and what your theme and plugin stack is, you probably fall into either a canvas theme or a block theme in my nomenclature. So the best two this is my opinion, okay? In my humble opinion, the best two canvas themes out there, whether you're using a block set to build or whether you're using a page builder like Elementor or Beaver Builder or, whatever, the best two themes out there are GeneratePress and Cadence. Now, there are others like Bricks, for example. It doesn't quite fit into either one of these. It is, I guess, officially a canvas theme, because it doesn't make use of the site editor, but it's kind of a theme and blocks builder all built in together. I probably should have put that in the handout here because Bricks is a fantastic framework. So GeneratePress and Cadence tend to be the two most popular, whether you're using your page builder of choice or the block sets that you like. Now, the block themes out there, there's a few of them that are worthy of a look. Blocksy is a great block theme. Ollie is amazing, especially the Ollie menu builder. It is absolutely amazing. And then Spectra from the Brainstorm Force folks. These are all three good, worthy themes. There are probably others, but my point in bringing all of these things together is pick a theme for all of your sites. Whatever you're doing as you're building, if you're doing client work with WordPress, you are going to be better if you pick a theme and stick with it. Just ride that horse until there is a business reason to change it. So for me and my agency, we use Cadence and Beaver Builder. Some people may look at Beaver Builder and look at it as a last generation tool. It's really not. It's quite good, very stable, very powerful. And I've not found yet a business reason to stop using it. Are there newer, prettier, shiny things out there? Yeah, probably, but they're still not as reliable. And there's not a business reason to change it. My inner geek may want to change it, but the business, it just doesn't make sense. And so my advice to you is pick a theme, pick a plugin stack, and ride that horse. Get better and better at it. Whatever you choose, just keep using that, keep getting better and better at it. You'll become more efficient, more proficient, and more confident as you use it. All right. So does that make sense? Pick a theme, stick with it. Now, as we're getting into the last little bit here, what we want to do as our last bit of work today is to set some WordPress defaults. So again, our goal is to replicate the base site for future client projects. And so there are a whole bunch of typical changes to the WordPress admin that we're going to do. And so here's some of those things. So in settings in general, we're just going to go make all these changes at one time here, and now they're there forever. We don't ever have to touch them again. So settings general, we're going to look at membership. Do we want people to register? Probably not. The site language, make sure that's set for you. The time zone, my time zone is Chicago, so I'm going to set that. We're also going to look at date and time format. I like that just fine. The day of the week here is going to start on Sunday, and so I'm going to save that. Now, I never have to change those settings again, unless maybe I have a client that's in the Eastern time zone and I need to change that or whatever. Now, the next place here, settings and writing. Now, this is a little tip that might save you a whole bunch of work later, because when you start a WordPress site, you have this beautiful uncategorized category. And how many of you today have clients who really should be categorizing their posts, but they just leave them all uncategorized? And it's not helpful for anybody. Well, what I recommend doing is setting up a category at the beginning that's something other than uncategorized. And what I tend to do is just create a category called news, because most of our clients, if they're blogging, it's like a small business or whatever, and it's going to be a news item. And so that's what we're going to call it. We're just going to, whoops, wrong thing. We're going to go into categories, and we're going to make a new category called news. And once that's created, I can go back to settings and reading, and I can change my default post category to news. Save that. And now I can go back and delete that uncategorized category forever. And now whenever I create a blog post, it's going to be called news. Jamie in the chat is suggesting resources. Great. Whatever you want to call it, make it that, make it the default, no more uncategorized, get rid of that. Do it once, you never have to do it again because it's in the starter site. All right, settings and reading. Very important setting here for your base site. Discourage search engines from indexing this site. We learned this lesson the hard way because one time many years ago, we had a site we were building. Somehow, inexplicably, it got indexed by Google, which meant that all this new wonderful content was existing on the dev site. Oops. And when we got ready to launch the live site, it was considered duplicate content. Not great. So check this box. Basically, all this box does is it outputs in the head of every page the no index for search engines. So we'll just save this here. Now, here's the other thing. Make sure, once you turn this checkbox on, make sure that at some point in your launch process, you turn this box off, because we've launched a site and forgot to uncheck this. And the client's like, why isn't the site getting indexed? We forgot to uncheck the box. Anybody else make that mistake? I've done it. Yep. And so don't do that. Make sure you add a step in your launch checklist to uncheck the box for search engine visibility. All right. Let's take a look at settings and discussion. Now, if you want comments, that this section controls comments on your site. If you're going to use comments, then make the settings as you would normally have them. We disable comments by default on every site. I don't think we have a single website. I don't think we have any websites at all, and all the ones we're managing where comments are enabled. It's just a spam fiesta. So it's just not helpful. So let the comments happen on social media and let them worry about the spam there. In 2 weeks, we'll have an MU plugin that I'll give you that disables comments site-wide. But for here, if you're going to use comments, just make the settings that you would most commonly make on the average site. Media needs a little adjustment as well. These are teeny tiny images for websites in 2025. So I typically change these from 150, 300, and 1024 to 300, 800, and 1200. Now, this is just my preference. You make these whatever you want. This is what I use. And go ahead and set these by default right there. These are pretty good sizes for today's website development. Also, I used to turn this off so everything was in one folder, and now I turn it on because it makes things easier to find after the fact. I just leave this on the default setting. But if you don't like all the month and year folders in your media library, you can uncheck it. No big deal. The point here is whatever settings that you tend to make on the majority of your sites, do them once here in the starter site. Then you never have to do it again unless, for some edge case, you have to change it, because you're going to have them all there. Then you just duplicate this template for future work. All right, now comes the fun part. We're going to go delete all the garbage that WordPress installed for us. And I'm just going to add here the Cadence theme. That is my theme of choice. I'm just going to go ahead and add that and let that be my default theme here. And now we're going to go in and remove all of these default themes. The easiest way to do that is right here in the Appearance and Themes UI. So we're just going to delete all of these. And that is all we need to do. Same goes for plugins. I don't want Akismet or Hello Dolly on my site. So they are now gone. And now we have 0 plugins on a WordPress site. You'll never see that again ever in the history of the world. Okay, great question. Stacy is asking about a child theme, and Leslie is asking about a backup theme. Okay, so there's a dissension about this. Some people say you should always have a default theme installed on your website in case you need to fall back to it. Other people say you shouldn't have any code on your website at all that's not in use. I tend to side with the second group. I can't remember the last time that I've needed to fall back to a default theme on the live site. And in the slim chance that I need to do that, I'll just install a default theme. It's not that hard to do, right? So I don't want in my base site any code that's not being used. And so I wipe all of those old themes away. And are we going to use a child theme? Yes, we are. We'll get into that. I believe that's in, that's in our next live stream. All right. So we've killed all of our plugins. We also need to go in and delete this Hello World post. So I'm going to trash it and empty the trash and our sample page. Now, likely you're going to have a privacy policy. So you can choose whether or not you want to leave this. I'm going to leave it here because my base site has a privacy policy page. Most of our clients aren't required to have a privacy policy just because of location or size or whatever, but we do have the privacy policy page in our base site. This is, again, one of those decisions where if you use Generally, if more than half of your builds have it, put it in there so that you're going to remove the repetitive work for yourself. All right. So all of our automatically installed content has been cleaned. And now we're just going to go through. I'm not actually going to do this for the sake of time because we're already in an hour. I'm just going to walk you through some of the suggestions that I would make as you are setting up this theme for the first time. There are tons of settings in your theme that you can make now and never have to touch again. So some of those are basic typography. So I almost always, unless there's something peculiar about the font that we've chosen, virtually always the base font we set to 18 pixels in size and 1.75 line height. And I've just found that's a good all-around setting that looks great for most fonts. Depending on the X height of the font, which is the ratio of the height of the lowercase letter to the uppercase letter, depending on that X height, you might have to tweak these settings a little bit. It just depends on the font. Most of the time, we don't have to change this. So I start with 18 pixels at 1.75. And then here's just a grid that gives you, this is from the Cadence grid for their typography. Your theme may have something similar, but these are the typical sizes and heights of fonts. Now we use rims here because it's going to be a multiple of our base font size. So if, for example, this font needs to be a little smaller or a little bigger, we can just change the base font size, and then all of our ratios for the heading sizes just multiply out based on that base font size. All right. So once you get all of your theme settings set up the way you like it, and there'll be other settings in your theme. You know, some themes have a performance section where you can load fonts locally and maybe turn on and off things like scroll to the top or, scroll down to an anchor on the page. All those theme type settings, set all of those to your most general settings. Then we can go and start creating some starter content. So creating a basic header and footer where you've got a sample logo, some basic pages and so forth, a call to action button, a search. Just get these basic things set up. Creating a set of standard pages. Our base install includes home, about, services, news, contact. Almost all of our sites have those pages. And so they're already set up and created in the base site. That's what forms our menu at the top. Just get some basic content in there that you might have to manipulate a little bit, but there's something to start with. Also, you might even consider filling out some of those pages, like the contact page on most sites usually has the same elements. So add address, map, phone number, just kind of get all that in with the basic design. Yeah. And you can, you'll have some of that ready to go as you're building the site. Jamie's asking, wouldn't services be a custom post type? Depends, right? If they've got 20 services, maybe, yeah. If they have 3, it's simpler just to use pages. It just depends on the site. So creating some sample posts as well. So 3 basic Ipsum text blog posts, just so you have something to see how it looks, right? So 3 sample posts with Ipsum text, 3 sample categories. I put 1 post in each category to make sure all the category page links are working. I put a featured image on each of them in the base site, just something royalty free, like from Pexels or something like that. And then I'll go into the customizer and set the way I would want most blog posts to look on a typical site. And that way, all those settings are set and working. We might want to add our social sharing to the template that we just set up once on our base site. Just get it the way you would want most of your blog posts to look. And that way, when you replicate it for a client work, you can tweak it if it needs to be tweaked. So having a few posts already set up that are just Ipsum text lets you manipulate and have it look the way you want it to look. You might also consider setting up templates for a 404 page. We love to customize the 404 pages for our clients, and having a template for that it's just set up and ready to go. It lets us do that. Also the search results the same way. Something else you might consider is once you get your starter site all set up and going, if you do e-commerce, for example, a lot, and you build a lot of WooCommerce sites, why not make a starter site for your WooCommerce sites? Because that has a lot of extra setup that you probably do every single time. So maybe have an e-commerce starter site. Or if you build niche sites for a particular industry, maybe you have a plumber's based site. Now, that can be really helpful if you do a lot of that kind of work. The downside is now you have multiple starter sites to manage. And you just have to make a decision whether it makes sense to have a niche site or an e-commerce starter site versus starting, if you only do a few of those, it might not make sense to have to manage those. But it could, if you do a lot of that work, it can save you a lot of time. All right. One more thing I'll mention as we're starting to wrap things to a close and we jump into some final questions. Let me encourage you to upgrade your hosting to hosting.com. Hosting.com provides these educational live streams at no cost to you because we want you to succeed. And one of the best ways you can succeed as a website developer for others is offering solid hosting. And I'll tell you, I host all of my client sites on hosting.com. We have a dedicated server there. I made that choice. I paid for it myself. Like it wasn't given to me free. We made that purchase decision because I think hosting.com is the best provider. Incredibly fast hardware. And if you're interested and you want to talk through some of those options, my friend Mike Demo is the partnerships lead for North America. You can scan that QR code or just call him and he'll talk through what your options are as an agency and which of the hosting.com products are the best fit for where you are in your agency, and it'll help you get the best deal on that. All right, so let's move into some questions. I see right away one from Leslie. Can you post the link for the registration? Yes, I'm going to drop in our link bundle here. And the very first link in that link bundle takes you to this page. And you will see right here the link for creating your starter site. And you can register right there. All right. So let me also open up the Zoom Q&A. There are some there as well. Let me just invite everyone, if you have a question, to use the Zoom Q&A. You can access that by mousing over the shared screen and clicking the Q&A icon on the toolbar. Open that up and upvote the questions that you would like to see answered, and we will try to get all of these in. We'll start, though, by answering the one from Barry. Once you have a starter site, how do you access it and then save it to the new website you're going to publish? Great question. So Barry, what we do is we use, I have too many windows open here. I'm trying to find my cPanel. Here it is. Okay. One of the wonderful things about WP Toolkit, we have a development domain that we use for all of our projects that we're building. And in that domain is our starter site. And so watch this. When you want to replicate your starter site for a new project, you just go right here and click the clone button. And again, give it the set of information that it asks for. What do you want this to be? We'll just call it new. It's going to create a subdomain. It's going to create a database and all of that. And it's going to just replicate that site for you right here. Just like it installed WordPress, WP Toolkit will replicate your starter site. This is the process we use when we're building a new site that starts from our starter site. Now, if you are not on hosting.com or you don't have access to WP Toolkit, you can use any number of tools to migrate a site. So, backup plugins like Updraft or so many of them. And folks can drop your suggestions there in the chat. Sherry uses all-in-one WP Migrate. That's a good one. So this has just created a new site called new.wp1.dev. So a new subdomain is created where just happened. Oh, I got a DNS problem. I didn't point I'm not going to solve that today. This is a DNS issue, not a WordPress issue. Sorry about that. The question is, how do you assign a domain to the new website? So that's going to depend on where and how you're hosting it, but you'll just set up that hosting space with your new domain. Then you can migrate with a WordPress plugin or let your host migrate it into that new space so that all the database is updated in WordPress to know that it's supposed to be at the new domain name. That's a little bigger than our conversation is today. We might do a live stream at some point about migrating sites to a new location. Most good WordPress backup plugins have a migration wizard that handles that for you. Okay, question from Jamie in the chat. I have to leave early. Is there going to be a recording? And this was asked an hour ago. So I think I answered it before you left, Jamie, about this is being recorded. It will be in our YouTube playlist. I'm going to drop that list of links here again in the chat. It is at replays.myagencysuccess.com. However, with this, as we're getting into the holidays, we might have a little bit of delay in getting our videos out to YouTube, just with availability of staff. Emily, I have a site, but don't know how to get it out of A2 and access it since it was created with Sandbox on a Mac originally. Hoping you will cover how to access. Emily, that is a little more than we can do today. However, I tell you what, if you want to, every Thursday, we do a free office hours. I'm here answering any questions that you want. So Emily, if you will join us for office hours on Thursday, you can ask your question at wpnathan.com. If I can type it. My goodness. Right up here at the top, ask a question. So this is just our demo site that we use. And so the link to ask questions, I've just dropped it in the chat. You can ask your question here, and I'll do my best to unpack that with you on Thursday. And yeah. All right. Next is from an anonymous attendee. How do we get the recorded version? We just answered that question, so hopefully that covered that. Billy asks, when you set the character set to UTF-8 MB4, do you have to modify the PHP settings? No, it's a totally different thing. So the character set has to do with your database, not with PHP. Two totally different things. Does that answer your question, Billy? And last but certainly not least, from Paul, it seems those files you deleted get re-added with an update. Is that true, or am I imagining this? I don't believe they do, Paul. I don't believe they do, but I'm ready to be proven wrong about that. All right. Any other questions? You can just drop those in the chat now if you'd like to. Barry, do you usually add a caching plugin to speed it up? Absolutely. WordPress needs caching. So in part 2 of this live stream, we're going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is give you my list of plugins that I would recommend you consider as a base plugin stack for a starter site. And part of that is going to be an image optimizing plugin and a caching plugin. There's various ones, but you definitely want something to do caching in WordPress. Great question. Anybody else there in the chat? Final questions before we wrap it up. Sorry, went a few minutes long. We had that unanticipated technical snag getting locked out of our own WordPress site, but hopefully that was a little bit of fun getting back into. Yep, I think that covers everything from here. All right, so we are back on. I think there's one more question. Sorry, I do see one more question. Jan is asking, a theme good for a photography site. So a photography site really, Jan, are you asking for something to manage photos or a theme that controls the visuals? You can, any of the canvas themes or block themes that I mentioned could work with a photography site, but you really need some sort of a plugin or service to show nice galleries of photos if you want something beyond the standard WordPress gallery blocks. Yeah, so I would honestly, one of the most beautiful, clean WordPress themes around now is Ollie. If you haven't seen Ollie is just beautiful. It is just beautiful. It has so many block patterns built into it. The cost is not a lot, even for the pro version. $69 a year for a site and you're good to go. It is absolutely beautiful, and it's built around the site editor. It is a clean, beautiful theme. So this is a really good place to start. And there is a free version that you can test out. I do believe, okay, I did drop in the link for the starter site guide for anyone that missed it. And we'll be back in 2 weeks for part 2 of your starter site live stream. Also, of course, Thursday, back for office hours, where we'll answer any of your questions about this or whatever else you would like to know. Thanks for hanging out with me for the last hour. I hope you've picked up some interesting things to do with your own starter site work, and I look forward to hearing how you're putting this content into practice. We'll see you back here next time on Agency Success from hosting.com, where we go further together.